Classic World of Warcraft has let us all go back to a different time in this game's history, allowing us to relive the nostalgia, the community, and to some extent the challenges that came with this older version of the game. But alongside that challenge comes a collection of features that range from mildly annoying to, in some cases, genuinely questionable. It is important to remember that Classic was a very experimental time for Blizzard. There were a lot of developers working separately on different things, and they were all just putting stuff in the game that they thought was cool. They didn't necessarily have oversight of exactly all the way that these things would be used so many years later. I mean, just look at what happened to world buffs. And the vast majority of the time, they got it right, thankfully. But sometimes they also got it not so right too. Today I want to talk about the parts of vanilla which I really tolerate rather than enjoy most of the time. I have to admit I did struggle a bit to come up with 10 things which I thought were worthy of being called one of the worst features of vanilla, but there are certainly a bunch which are worth mentioning. So with that said, let's make a start on this. First, a quick word from today's sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game out there on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and now mobile. There are over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships across 10 major nations, ranging from early 20th century vehicles right through to modern fighter jets. There is simply a huge amount of content to explore. What sets War Thunder apart is the depth of its vehicle damage model. Forget simple health bars. Instead, every component from engines to fuel tanks to the crew can be individually damaged, and the X-ray view shows you precisely what happens when a vehicle goes down. It's the kind of detail that really matters for realism. There are also 3 game modes in arcade, realistic, and simulator, catering to everyone from a casual player to a full-on simulation enthusiast. And with 95 million players worldwide, there will always be a battle waiting. War Thunder is free to play right now on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile. New accounts and players who haven't played in the last 6 months on either PC or console can claim a massive bonus pack including multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account. It's only available for a limited time, so make sure you grab it while you can from the links down below. Many thanks to War Thunder for the sponsor today. Let's get on back to WoW. At number 10 we have how flight paths can occasionally send you on a scenic route and take 3 to 4 times as long as they need to. Everyone's experienced this. You've clicked on a flight path to travel somewhere, you can draw a straight line on your map from one location to the other, then you look at the flight path interface and for some reason the game wants to take you on a detour that's going to take you about 10 minutes extra. Now this isn't technically a bug or anything working incorrectly, this is how the system was designed, it's working as intended. Flight paths connect through specific flight paths that you have discovered, so if you're missing a flight path on your route to wherever you're going, then the game is going to take you on one of these detours. This is especially true on Kalimdor I find, and if you're missing either flight paths in Feralas on Horde or Alliance or the Ashara flight path, there's a pretty good chance they're going to send you on a really long journey. Now admittedly I don't particularly mind this, and that's because I tend to remember to pick up flight paths when I'm going around the world, and I don't tend to get summoned that often, so it's not really a reoccurring issue. But if it does happen, well, it's just a reminder to go get that flight path at some point in time, and in the meantime to take a break from the game whilst your character sees the sights. Next up is getting hit from mobs vertically above or below you. So if you play Classic for any length of time, you have absolutely encountered this phenomenon. You'll be standing on a ledge or in a tower somewhere or in water, and there will be mobs still meleeing you, even though most of the time you literally cannot even see them on your screen. This creates some really confusing moments, especially for newer players who will have no idea why they're still getting hit. It feels like a bug within the game, but it's not. It's just when enemies are vertically above or below you, they can still melee you. They don't care about how much distance there is between you. Now when you're playing a hardcore mode, this can be genuinely deadly if you get stuck inside a tower and you can't escape and all the mobs above and below you are still able to melee you. But oftentimes apart from that, it's just a bit of an annoyance. At number 8 is the Darkmoon Fur buff cooldown system. So as you all know, the buffs from the Darkmoon Fur are super powerful, the biggest one being 10% bonus damage. So of course Blizzard needed to add some kind of cooldown system to prevent people from stacking these buffs or from having 100% uptime on them. What they came up with though is just really weird. So after you get a Darkmoon Fur buff, you can't get another one for 4 hours, which is simple enough, right? However, there is a workaround. If you log out in a rested area in an inn or a major city, the timer continues to count down as if you were online, but only if you stay logged out for a full 8 hours in a row. If you log back in before those 8 hours are up, you reset the rested area timer and have to start over. Also, you have to be unbooned as well, you can't have the buffs stored. For raiders, this can create a pretty awkward situation where either you just need to be logged on for 4 hours doing, well, whatever really, or you have to ensure you're logged out for 8 hours in a row in a rested area, which, depending on the time of day, can also be super inconvenient. On top of that, of course, the countdown system is hidden and you need an add-on to track it. All in all, it's just a very confusing system, and I feel like there had to have been a better way to do this. And number 7, I have the World PvP events in vanilla World of Warcraft. So Classic WoW has 2 dedicated World PvP events with actual objectives and rewards. I use the word reward very loosely here because not many people take advantage of them. These 2 PvP events are the Tower System in Eastern Plaguelands and the Silithus Collection event. I've always thought that there should be more to these events and they should encourage people to get into the PvP associated with them more than what happens at the moment. In fact, in Season of Discovery, I thought for a moment that Blizzard was going to revamp these events for endgame, and instead they just made entirely new events. So Eastern Plaguelands has a bunch of towers that can be captured by either faction. Controlling them provides a buff to your faction and unlock some additional rewards. There's even an extra flight path in the zone which you probably didn't know about. Silithus has an event where you can collect Silithid from the floor and then carry it back to your faction and turn it in for minor rewards. This forces you to cross the desert on foot and should open up opportunities for PvP, but similar to the towers in EPL, the rewards just really aren't that worth it. The best thing about it is you can get a damage buff after turning one of these dusts in, however you can't chronoboon this buff, so most of the time people just don't bother. There is some potential here with these 2 World PvP events, I just think they're both underutilized and really not a great part of Classic WoW as a whole. Next up is Shared Spawn Quest Objectives. This is another thing you will have absolutely experienced within the game. A quest will tell you to go to an area and kill a specific mob. You'll find the spawn location, but instead of your quest target, there are a bunch of different mobs standing there. So you run around and around the area looking for the mob that you need, but you just can't find it, and you assume that, wow, these things just have a really rare spawn or something. Nope, the majority of the time it will be a shared quest spawn. You know that quest in Elwyn Forest where you have to kill the different types of bears? That shared spawn, that's where you can never find any of the black bears. How about that quest in Western Plaguelands where you have to kill diseased wolves and all you can find is spiders? Yep, shared spawn again. How about that harpy quest in Stone Talon Mountains where you can never find the ones you need? Guess what? It's the shared spawn quest. The inconvenience with this is you don't know what the problem is unless you just kind of already know what the problem is, because people will turn up who don't understand it's shared spawn and they will never clear out the trash mobs because they don't need them, when in fact they do need to kill them to open up spawn locations for the correct mobs, they just don't know how the system works. And there is no way to know which quests have shared spawns unless you look it up online or just already know it, which makes it an even more painful experience. In fact, the same issue can affect gathering nodes as well. You know when you're leveling mining in a low level zone and you can only find higher tier items? Well, that's because somebody's mined the lower tier nodes and they've respawned as a higher tier one, and someone with a higher skill needs to go and mine them before they have a chance to respawn as a lower tier one again. It's not that you're looking in the wrong place, the nodes you need just don't exist right now and there's not anything you can do about it. If there was some kind of quest text that gave an indication things were shared spawn, this would be okay, because to level in vanilla you have to do a lot of grinding anyway, so it's really not that big of a deal, but just having a knowledge check which is outside of the game holding you back from questing, I don't think that's too much fun. Next up I have a whole type of quest, because if there's one type of quest that universally people don't like, it's escort quests. You know what I'm talking about? You're freeing some NPC who immediately starts walking at a pace which is faster than your walking speed but slower than your running speed, so you're always having to stop and start. And then on top of that, the NPC is just incredibly stupid when it comes to enemy aggro. At times they'll pull stuff from miles away and go sprinting towards a pack of 3 or 4 enemies, and other moments they won't pull threat until they're in a few yards of something, and then they'll end up pulling 3 or 4 things anyway. Some of the hardest solo quests in vanilla are absolutely absolutely escort quests. The mechanical chicken quests in Tanaris, the Hinterlands and Feralus are particularly infamous for this. Then there's some other ones which are tricky, such as escorting the Defias traitor. If you're doing that solo, it can be pretty difficult. Those Defias pillagers, they hurt. What about escorting Deathstalker Island in Silverpine Forest through that small field, which for some reason has about 1 million wargs in it? And of course, if the NPC dies, its quest failed and you have to go and stand there and wait for them to respawn. And oftentimes their respawns can be a good 10 to 15 minutes, so have fun with that. There's a reason escort quests are infamous, not only in World of Warcraft, but across, well, I feel basically every game genre. It's a thing that I swear no one particularly likes, but we just keep doing it now out of tradition. And number 4 is named mobs and respawn timers. This one pretty much came directly off the back of the escort quest, because going back and remembering some mob respawns in the game, you have to wonder what exactly Blizzard were thinking. We have a game genre that's called massively multiplayer, and then if one person interacts with an enemy, kills a named mob, starts an escort quest, well then the next person has to wait sometimes 10, 15, even 20 minutes for that guy to respawn. Now if we're reading into this generously, I suppose the theory was in the downtime you're supposed to go and grind mobs, do some professions, assemble a group to do the quests when it respawns, PvP, or just, you know, socialize in general. And I suppose many of those things were a bigger deal back in the day than they are now. But nowadays it just feels as though when you get to a quest location, the mob you need is dead, and you're going to be standing around for 10 minutes or so waiting for it to respawn. Other players can often have a large impact on your gameplay experience in vanilla World of Warcraft, for the better or for the worse. And for me, this is one of the not so enjoyable ways it happens. And number 3, I have the auction house. So, Classic's auction house has a pretty fundamental flaw. By default, it sorts items by current bid price, not buyout price. And this may seem like a minor thing, but it enables an annoying scam in the game. So a player will list any random item for a 1 copper bid and a buyout price of hundreds of gold. And because how the auction house defaults to showing lowest current bid first, these scam listings appear at the top of every search. The scammer is essentially hoping you'll misclick and hit buyout when you're just not paying attention to a bunch of things that you're picking up on the auction house. And it works, of course, otherwise people wouldn't do it. When you're just trying to go on the auction house and buy some rune cloth, you may not always be paying full attention, and suddenly you're a few hundred gold down and feeling super demotivated. Worst of all is scammers can still cancel their auctions if somebody bids on them at a low price, so they're really not losing out on that much either. I know a lot of people wouldn't want the modern interface from the auction house and it would be too much of a change from what they know, but if we're going to have this version, it would be so much better if either things were listed differently by default, or if you could right click player names on the auction house and just ignore them or even report them for these scam listings. At least that will put some power back in the player's hands. Or alternatively, you can do what the majority of the players do, at least I think they do, which is A, say I don't want the new auction house interface or functionality, but B, I acknowledge the old auction house is really bad by default, so I'm going to use an add-on to fix it. And number 2 is the Cenarian Circle badge system. So if you want some of the best items from the Cenarian Circle reputation, you're going to have to navigate one of Classic's most confusing reputation and badge systems. The way it works is like this. You'll complete repeatable quests in Silithus that reward different types of badges. There are combat badges, logistics badges, and tactical badges. Each quest will give you one type of badge, so combat is going to involve combat, tactical will involve talking to NPCs hidden around the map, and logistics has you turn stuff in. But the problem here is getting a good quest which you can fully do can often be super annoying, and you end up having to delete a lot of quests because they're just not ones which you can realistically complete on your character, or they're asking you to hand in things which are just way too expensive for the reward. And for some of the best items, you're going to need dozens of these badges in total. When Season of Discovery brought this system back, modern players created WeCores after not too long, which would automatically delete the bad quests and automatically share the good ones with your group. That tells you pretty much everything you need to know about how confusing and RNG dependent this system was. And even with add-ons fixing this system, it was still pretty bad. It's a perfect example of complexity that just didn't need to happen. It's RNG on top of the grind, and the grind itself is not particularly fun either. I know people who did rank 14 multiple times during Classic when there was still decay, and they still wouldn't get Earth Strike more than once. That's how you know this was a bad grind. I want to do an honourable mention too for something which I feel as though has to appear on a list of the worst features of vanilla: world buffs. And they're only going to be an honourable mention and not something properly on the list because, in theory, I like world buffs. I think when you're using them in dungeons, they're a fun little addition, and in the open world they make your character genuinely more enjoyable to play for a few hours. But what players have made world buffs into for raiding completely takes all the fun out of them. Suddenly they become this mandatory list of buffs that you need to get in order to perform well inside a raid. Or on anniversary, you'll even be given an extra soft reserve for collecting all the world buffs. So yes, they really do still matter. On top of that, world buffs affect your character's power more than gear upgrades. A lot of progression in an MMO is simply making your character do bigger numbers, and there's nothing that makes you do bigger numbers than collecting your world buffs. Even with the Chronoboon, the world buff system is bad in my opinion, because if you die once in a raid, your fun is gone for the evening. You're already getting punished by dying, having to be rezzed and slowing the raid down, and having to reconsume. Losing all your world buffs on top of that is just absolute misery. When I said at the start that developers back in the day were just randomly putting things in the game they thought sounded cool, this is the perfect example. When you hand in the head of an Ixia, it's supposed to be a mini lore type celebration where everyone in the city gains a buff for 2 hours. Not, oh, I need to get this buff on 3 separate characters so I can do a bit more damage in raid this evening. So yeah, world buffs, not necessarily a bad system by themselves, but what players have turned them into is bad. Finally, at the number 1 spot, and there could literally only ever be one thing for this number 1 spot, it's the PvP ranking system. The PvP ranking system in vanilla World of Warcraft is, without exaggeration, one of the worst designed systems I've ever seen in a game. Blizzard got so many things right with this game. This was not one of them. In a super simplified way, you earn honor points, and then at the end of the week you get ranking points which contribute to your total rank. But the thing with this PvP system is you're not competing against the opposite faction, you're competing against your own faction on your server. And to reach the highest ranks, you must be among the top honor earners. But the killer is, usually with this PvP system, there is decay, and you lose a bunch of your progression each week. So essentially, once you've started ranking up and you're getting to the higher ranks, you can't stop. If you stop and lose a week, decay will wipe out a lot of progression. This means typically if you seriously want rank 14, you are genuinely locked into doing somewhere between 10 to 14 hours of PvP every single day for months in a row, and you cannot have a break. Otherwise, you will lose everything you've worked towards. The thing about the PvP gear, especially the rank 12, 13 or 14 items, is that they were all incredibly powerful, being relatively equivalent to gear from BWL or AQ40. So a ton of people would do PvP even if they did not care about it. Because of this, the type of PvP that emerged from this was often just terrible. The fastest honor wasn't from actual competitive PvP, it was from organized pre-made stomping pugs. You wanted efficient PvP, not good PvP. This entire system was just really flawed in basically about every single way possible. The only real positive you could say about it was that at least the gear from it was difficult to get, and it gave some kind of prestige to people hitting the higher ranks. But even then, in vanilla with decay, you would lose your PvP titles once your rank went back down. You wouldn't lose access to the gear you bought though, obviously. And it's no surprise in TBC then that Blizzard removed this system as soon as they possibly could. Throughout every game I played, I've never come across a PvP system as A, convoluted, and B, just player unfriendly as this one. So for me, it has to be the worst feature of classic World of Warcraft. But those are just 10 of my worst features. Again, some of the earlier ones are more just little annoyances which aren't really that bad, and overall Blizzard got a tremendous amount of things right with vanilla World of Warcraft, which is why so many people still play it all these years later. What do you think though? Was there anything else which I should have included here? Let me know about it. Thanks once again to War Thunder for sponsoring today's video. It's free to play cross-platform, and new players or anyone who hasn't logged in for 6 months can also grab a free bonus pack via the links in the description. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.